The morning of the 7th of December, 1941, began with a deceptive, heavy tranquility over the island of Oahu. The Pacific Fleet lay anchored in the shallow, crystalline waters of Pearl Harbor, resting in silence. This fragile peace was shattered abruptly when waves of Japanese carrier-based aircraft descended from the clouds. They unleashed a devastating surprise assault that caught the American forces entirely off guard and unprepared. Battleships were transformed into raging infernos as torpedoes and bombs struck with cold, lethal mechanical precision. The harbor turned into a surreal landscape of thick black smoke, orange fire, and catastrophic destruction. Sailors scrambled frantically to their battle stations amidst the rising chaos and the deafening, constant roar. They witnessed the sudden, tragic loss of thousands of lives and the crippling of naval power. The sheer scale of the devastation sent massive shockwaves across the globe, altering the strategic landscape. The Second World War shifted instantly, leaving the American military reeling from an unprecedented, brutal blow. This tragedy demanded an immediate and decisive response from the highest levels of the American government. The sun rose over the harbor, illuminating the calm surface before the sudden, violent aerial onslaught. Rows of battleships sat peacefully, their hulls reflecting the morning light, unaware of the impending doom. Suddenly, the horizon darkened as hundreds of aircraft appeared, their engines humming a deadly, low vibration. The first torpedoes sliced through the water, striking the massive steel hulls with thunderous, echoing impacts. Explosions ripped through the decks, sending plumes of fire and twisted metal high into the air. Men rushed across the burning decks, their faces etched with confusion, terror, and a desperate resolve. The water became a churning cauldron of oil, debris, and the remnants of a shattered fleet. Anti-aircraft guns barked rhythmically, trying to track the agile planes weaving through the dense, dark smoke. Everywhere, the sounds of sirens wailed, competing with the relentless, rhythmic thud of falling aerial bombs. The pride of the Pacific Fleet was being systematically dismantled, sinking into the shallow, muddy harbor. Young sailors fought to contain the infernos, their uniforms stained with soot and the dark oil. The sky above Pearl Harbor turned charcoal gray, choked by the thick, acrid smoke of burning. Communication lines were severed, leaving commanders in the dark as the situation deteriorated with every second. The surprise attack was absolute, a calculated strike designed to paralyze the American naval presence entirely. Ships capsized slowly, their massive rusted bellies rising above the surface like the backs of whales. The air was thick with the smell of burning fuel and the metallic tang of blood. Many men found themselves trapped below decks, the rising water sealing their fates in the dark. Others dived into the oily, burning water, swimming desperately toward the shore amidst the falling debris. The once tranquil morning was now a living nightmare, a testament to the suddenness of war. High above, the pilots circled, their mission nearly complete as the harbor burned in total ruin. The American forces, though stunned, began to organize a defense, firing back with whatever they possessed. The sheer audacity of the assault left the entire nation in a state of profound disbelief. News of the disaster traveled rapidly, reaching the mainland and igniting a fire of national anger. The strategic balance of the Pacific had been irrevocably altered in less than 2 short hours. The world watched in horror as the smoke billowed, signaling the end of American isolationist dreams. The military leadership scrambled to assess the damage, finding the fleet decimated and the docks destroyed. The loss of life was staggering, a heavy toll that would define the coming years ahead. The harbor, once a symbol of American strength, now lay broken, a graveyard of sunken ships. The silence that followed the final wave of planes was more haunting than the initial explosions. It was a silence filled with the weight of thousands of lives lost in the fire. The nation stood at a crossroads, the path forward paved with the necessity of total conflict. The government prepared its response, the shock of the morning hardening into a cold, steel resolve. The sleeping giant had been awakened, and the world braced for the inevitable, massive American retaliation. The calm waters of Oahu were forever stained by the events of that fateful, dark morning. The legacy of Pearl Harbor would echo through history, a reminder of the cost of peace. The fires continued to smolder long after the last plane vanished into the distant, hazy horizon. The wreckage remained as a grim monument to the surprise that changed the course of history. The American people, united by grief and fury, looked toward the future with a new purpose. The era of neutrality had ended, replaced by the grim, urgent reality of a global war. The strategic landscape was transformed, forcing the nation to project its power across the vast oceans. The military began the long, difficult process of rebuilding, fueled by the memory of the fallen. The attack had failed to break the American spirit, instead forging it into something much stronger. The highest levels of government moved with unprecedented speed, mobilizing the resources of a vast nation. The tragedy served as the ultimate catalyst, turning a divided country into a single, focused force. The momentum of the war began to shift even as the smoke cleared over the harbor. The United States emerged from the ashes, ready to confront the challenges of a world ablaze. The events of December 7th remained etched in the collective memory of every single American citizen. The giant had finally awakened, and the world would never be the same after this day. The long, grueling road to victory had begun in the smoke and fire of Pearl Harbor. As the smoke cleared over the harbor, the shock of the carnage galvanized a deeply divided nation. Americans who had previously debated foreign intervention now found themselves united by a common, searing grief. The following day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt stood before a somber and hushed Congress to speak. His voice resonated through the chamber, declaring that December 7 would forever live in absolute infamy. This powerful address effectively dismantled the prevailing isolationist sentiment that had gripped the country for years. With a near-unanimous vote, the United States formally declared war on the Empire of Japan today. This historic action officially ended American neutrality, committing vast industrial resources to the global conflict ahead. Human resources were mobilized with unprecedented speed as young men flocked to enlist in the military. The tragedy at Pearl Harbor served as the ultimate catalyst for this profound and sudden transformation. It turned the American public into a singular, unified force determined to seek swift, righteous retribution. Factories across the nation began to pivot, shifting their focus toward the massive production of weaponry. Steel mills roared with new life, churning out the hulls of ships and the wings of planes. This pivotal transition marked the beginning of a total mobilization effort that would change the world. Every citizen felt the weight of the war effort, contributing their labor to the national cause. The momentum of the conflict began to shift as American resolve hardened against the enemy forces. Years of grueling combat lay ahead, but the initial hesitation had been replaced by firm purpose. The nation moved forward with a collective grit that defined the character of the American people. Across the Pacific, the military prepared to strike back with the full weight of its power. The strategic landscape of the Second World War was irrevocably altered by this newfound American commitment. No longer a bystander, the United States stood at the center of the global struggle for freedom. The industrial might of the country became the backbone of the Allied forces in the theater. Every ship launched into the sea carried the hopes of a nation hungry for ultimate victory. The memory of the burning harbor fueled the determination of soldiers on every distant, bloodied front. They fought with a ferocity born from the sudden loss of their brothers in the surprise. The government orchestrated a massive logistical operation to supply troops across the vast, dangerous ocean expanses. Women entered the workforce in record numbers, taking their places in the bustling, vital defense plants. Their contribution proved essential to maintaining the pace of production required for the long war. The home front became a mirror of the battlefield, characterized by sacrifice and unwavering, steady resolve. As the months passed, the initial trauma of the attack evolved into a disciplined, focused rage. The United States was rapidly emerging as a dominant superpower on the crowded, volatile world stage. The path to victory was long, but the nation never once wavered in its primary goal. Every battle won brought the country closer to securing a lasting peace for the entire world. The giant had been awakened, and it would not rest until the threat was finally extinguished. History would remember this era as the moment when the American spirit was truly tested, hardened. The unity forged in the wake of the disaster became the bedrock of the coming victory. From the ashes of Pearl Harbor, a new global order began to rise with great speed. The strategic decisions made in Washington echoed across the continents, shaping the future of all nations. The military forces grew in size and capability, learning from the harsh lessons of the past. Technological advancements were accelerated by the urgent demands of the ongoing, desperate, and global conflict. The world watched as the American machine roared to life, changing the course of human history. The sacrifice of those lost at Pearl Harbor was never forgotten by the men in uniform. It served as a constant reminder of the stakes involved in the fight against the Axis. The nation stood together, bound by a shared history and a common, very clear destiny. The mobilization effort touched every town, every city, and every household across the vast land. It was a total war, requiring the participation of every single American citizen in the effort. The transition from isolation to global leadership was swift, decisive, and marked by immense, heavy sacrifice. The United States emerged from the crucible of war as a beacon of strength and hope. The legacy of the attack was not just one of destruction, but of profound, lasting change. It forced the country to confront its role in the world and accept its heavy responsibilities. The momentum gathered during these early days would carry the Allies to the final, hard-won victory. The world would never be the same after the events that unfolded in December of 1941. The sleeping giant had finally awakened, and its power would be felt across the entire globe. The resolve of the American people remained unbreakable throughout the long, dark years of the war. They faced the challenges with courage, knowing that the future of freedom depended on their success. The industrial output continued to climb, providing the necessary tools for the liberation of occupied lands. The strategic shift was complete, leaving no doubt about the ultimate outcome of the global struggle. The nation looked toward the horizon, ready to face whatever trials the future might bring forth. The war had changed everything, forging a new identity for the United States in the process. The journey toward victory was arduous, but the unity of the people remained the guiding light. The giant stood tall, ready to defend the values that defined the heart of the nation.